Hello viewers, I do hope you are enjoying our program on Functional English, which is English for effective communication. You must remember that learning a language, whether it's your mother tongue or it's your second language, other tongue, is a process of making a number of appropriate choices and putting them together in an organized way. What you are going to view now is how language can be of tremendous help to students who are in a real mess, to a particular student who has not been able to do well in an exam, and how language in the form of advice and suggestions can act like a booster to his morale.
Well, Varsha, how did the exams go?
I think I'll pass through. How about you?
I think I've done well. But why does our dear friend Arvind look so worried?
Let's ask him. Hey Arvind, what's the matter?
It didn't work.
What didn't work?
Manohar's strategy.
Strategy? What strategy?
Yesterday, Manohar told me that he had done well in his history exam. I asked him what the secret of his success was. We all know that he has been failing in his exams for the last 2 years. Can you guess how he did well this time?
Don't tell me that he managed to get a copy of the question paper the night before the exam.
Of course not. Well, what he said is that he listened to his friend read the history book aloud. Dates, names, events flew into his head.
Well, and what does Manohar's strategy have to do with you looking so sad?
Well, I thought it would be a good idea to follow Manohar's strategy. So, last evening I asked Anita to read her sociology notes aloud. I listened to her carefully, but nothing happened.
Don't be ridiculous, Arvind. Of course it wouldn't work. You can't take these absurd ideas seriously.
Do you know that Kala got some amulet from a saint? She believes that this amulet will help her to do well in the exams.
That's absurd. These phony saints make money and mislead people. Arvind, the only way to do well in your exams is to work hard and study well.
What else do you suggest, Dhruv? How do you manage to fare so well in your exams? I think you should really help Arvind out in this. He could do with some help.
Yes, Dhruv, you really must help me. I really want to do well in my exams.
There's no easy way out, Arvind. Remember that nothing can be achieved overnight. I suggest you make use of certain learning strategies.
Learning strategies? What are they?
Learning strategies are important and at times very essential too. Everyone has his or her own way of learning. Let us try to find ways of making the process of learning enjoyable.
How does one really make the learning process enjoyable?
Yes, could you say something more on this learning process?
Let's go to the library. There are many books on this subject.
Yes, that's a wonderful idea.
In our library? I don't believe it.
Yes, our library is a wonderful place. Come on, let's go.
Yes, let's go.
But there are so many books on learning strategies. I can't possibly read them all. How can I read so many books in such a short time? Could you suggest a way out?
That's where strategies come to our help. For example, let's have a look at this book. It's a book on reading strategies.
Reading strategies? What do you mean by that?
Techniques to help you read faster and better. The book suggests a certain approach which will help you sharpen your comprehension and increase your reading efficiency and speed. Similarly, we have here books on listening and writing.
Thank you, Dhruv. I'll follow your advice, read these books, and use the strategies. Now that I know there are books that will help me learn better, I am sure to do well in my exams.
Arvind, I strongly recommend that you read these books and use only those strategies that will prove useful to you. Remember, everyone has his or her own way of trying to understand things and then designing their own strategies for them. Therefore, be careful. Don't use approaches that you aren't able to relate to.
I'll ask you if I have any problems with these books.
Of course you can. But where's Varsha?
There she is, totally immersed in a book. Varsha, what are you reading?
This is a very interesting book. It's on language games. It tells us how to teach children words and their ways through the use of games. I intend to read this book.
But this is meant for beginners.
Yes, and the beginner is none other than my 6-year-old niece.
Are there any books for students of our age?
There are quite a few out there on those racks.
Oh, great. They should help me prepare for my entrance exams. I'm sure this is the right strategy.
Congratulations, Dhruv. That was a job well done. Arvind is happy, and I hope he does well in his exams. No shortcuts, no amulets. Hard work leads to success.
Arvind really had a problem, and it was kind of Varsha and Dhruv to have helped him out. It is quite natural for us to offer advice and suggestion, as well as ask for advice and suggestion. There are different linguistic ways of asking for and offering advice and suggestions. They can be used in formal and informal situations. Let us see how Arvind and Varsha seek advice from Dhruv.
What else do you suggest, Dhruv? How do you manage to fare so well in your exams? I think you should really help Arvind out in this. He could do with some help.
Yes, Dhruv, you really must help me. I really want to do well in my exams.
The first clip that we saw just now, in which Varsha says, "What do you suggest then?" is a very mild form of asking for suggestions that can be used in semi-formal situations. Whereas the second clip can be used in informal situations, that is, while talking to our friends. There are a number of different ways of doing it, like, "You really ought to help me. Why don't you suggest something to me? Do you have any suggestions to make? Could you suggest a way out? Why don't you help me out?" Advising someone means giving guidance to someone. Did you notice how Dhruv gave suggestions to his friend?
There's no easy way out, Arvind. Remember that nothing can be achieved overnight. I suggest you make use of certain learning strategies. Let's go to the library. There are many books on this subject. Arvind, I strongly recommend that you read these books and use only those strategies that will prove useful to you. Remember, everyone has his or her own way of trying to understand things and then designing their own strategies for them. Therefore, be careful. Don't use approaches that you aren't able to relate to.
The suggestion that we give to a person depends upon the relationship that we share with the person, the context, and the nature of suggestion itself. The relationship between a doctor and a patient, an employer and an employee, and a teacher and a student are very formal. The doctor, therefore, says to the patient, "I strongly recommend you take these medicines." the teacher says to the student, "I strongly suggest you read these books." And an employer says to an employee, "I strongly suggest that you come to the office at 9 o'clock every morning." In very informal situations, we can say, these kind of expressions can be used when we are talking to our neighbors, friends, brother, sister, or somebody who is not in a position which is higher than us. Did you notice how Varsha and Arvind accepted Dhruv's suggestion?
Yes, that's a wonderful idea.
Thank you, Dhruv. I'll follow your advice and read these books and use the strategies. Oh, great. They should help me prepare for my entrance exams. I'm sure this is the right strategy.
Congratulations, Dhruv. That was a job well done. Arvind is happy, and I hope he does well in his exams.
There are different ways of accepting someone's advice or suggestion. Like, "It was kind of you to help me. I'll do that. Thanks for your advice. That sounds a great idea. Wow, I think it'll help. Thank you for your suggestion. Thanks a lot for your advice." But there are times when you don't like the idea or the suggestion given. You know it won't work. What will you do then? Will you simply refuse or reject the suggestion? No. It's a nice gesture to thank the person first for the time given to you, and because the person has listened to your problem and suggested a way out. You can do it in a number of ways. "Thanks a lot for your advice, but I don't think it will work. Thank you for your suggestion, but my problem is really complex." Today we have seen a number of ways of offering and seeking advice and suggestions. I'm sure you will use them in your daily conversation and try to find other ways of doing that.
You must have realized by now that the main focus of this particular program is on advice and suggestions, which are two important language functions. This can be done in two ways: asking for advice and suggestions and offering advice and suggestions. Let's look at the first one, asking for advice and suggestions. "Please give me a piece of advice. I really need your help. You must help me. I'm in a real mess." Now let's move on to the second one, offering suggestions. Let's go to the library. There are a number of books in the library on this subject. Shall we go to the library now? How about going to the library now? Now you must notice that there are three different ways of offering suggestion, and we are moving from very informal to formal and a very polite way of offering suggestions. Let's look at a different kind of situation. I suggest that we postpone the meeting until tomorrow. Let's postpone the meeting until tomorrow. Very tentative, very suggestive. Or, "I think you might like to postpone the meeting until tomorrow." Very indirect and a very polite way of offering the same kind of suggestion. So please note that offering advice, offering suggestions, asking for advice and asking for the suggestions can be done in a variety of ways, in a very direct way or in a very indirect, polite, tactful, suggestive way. And I suggest that Please note that whenever we use suggest, it is followed by a that clause. I suggest that you follow the second method, which is an informal and a very suggestive and a very tactful way of offering suggestions. I do hope you will be able to use language effectively in a variety of situations. Thank you very much.